Hello everybody, welcome back to another Miss Pollard Math YouTube video. Today we're going to be going over solving word problems and specifically how to create equations from word problems and solve them. So it's very important that we know how to solve an equation from our prior skills so we can adequately support and solve the problem, right? So if we don't know how to solve an equation, we're going to have some difficulties with this. So we might have to refresh our skills and look at the past YouTube videos on solving equations to make sure that we can fully solve the problem. So first, it's important to determine what do I need to do to solve a word problem. So some key points I like to point out are first to highlight or circle all the important information. So obviously at all times we don't always have a highlighter, but you can circle, you can underline all the key important points that you think you're going to need to use within the problem. So I would always highlight the numbers. I would always highlight what we're working with. Our items. So if we're working with apples, we're working with oranges, I would highlight all the information that we think will be important to solve the problem. And our key terms, so when we did translating equations, we discussed sum, quotient, product, plus, minus, less than, things like that. So I would highlight all those key terms so I can think about how I should apply them to the problem. I want to also determine and write down the variable and its meaning. So for example, if we're dealing with apples, I would say A is for apples. And this becomes important when we're doing more complex equations and word problems where we're going to have two different variables. And if you just say X and Y, how do I know which item you're talking about? So you would have to say X is apples. You could choose any variable as long as you define what the variable is. Then you want to determine the constant. So the constant is the number that is charged one time, or like it's only at one point, or the starting amount, you only do it once. It's the original, the starting, or the one-time fee, for example. So we want to determine that. We also want to determine the rate. So what's happening each time? So you see the word each, the per, the repetition, it's occurring over and over again. That's going to be our rate. And then we want to write the equation. So it's important that we jot down the equation that we're going to use to properly set up our word problem equations. So this would be our equation. It's the total, which we would highlight the total so we can plug it in, equals the rate times the variable plus the constant. So I would have this written at the top of your paper so you remember that this is the equation we're going to be using. And this is why we set up the problems where we write down what each portion of this is so we can plug it into the equation and then solve it. So now we're going to look at a word problem to see how we would properly complete it. So here we have our first example problem. So it says a new one-year membership at Rexplex costs $160. A registration fee of $28 is paid up front and the rest is paid monthly. How much would a new member pay each month? So we are going to want to highlight those key important parts here. So it's a one-year membership. I mean, that's good to know. 1 year membership costs $160. A registration fee of $28 is paid up front. So a fee is paid of $28 and then the rest is paid monthly. How much do new members pay each month? So we are worrying about the pay per month. So these are important things to highlight just so we know what we're working with. And something I like to do first is to point out what's the total here so we can plug that into our equation and not use it for other portions. So the total, the cost that they're giving you is $160. They're telling you you have to pay $160. So I'm not going to use the $160 for any of the other portions of this. So I want to define the variable. So what am I trying to find? I want to know how much it costs each month. So I'm going to say M for each month, but you can also say C, you could use X, you can use any variable you like. It does not matter if you're comfortable solving equations with X's mainly, you could use X, but that's why we define what it means. So I'm going to say M is the cost per month. Then I want to determine the constant. So what is the number that I'm paying for once, or it's only occurring once, or my starting amount? And that's going to be $28, a registration fee. Now I could go to the gym 0 months, so I could just sign up and I have to pay the $28. So my constant is going to be $28. It's not reliant on how many months I go. I just pay it no matter how many months. And then I want to know what the rate is. So the rate is per each month. Well, we have a 1-year membership. Well, 1 year has 12 months, and we're paying it monthly. So each month, we have the word each, right? I can say that monthly means each month. When we're working with rates, we are trying to find the words each, per, a reoccurring thing. So each month, well, in a year, there's 12 months. And I know this one's a little bit more abstract to us, but the rate's going to be 12, which is monthly. Then we need to plug it into our equation that we hopefully wrote on our paper at the top, which is the total equals the rate times the variable plus the constant. So our total here is the $160. That will equal our rates, which is 12, times our variable, which we chose as m, plus our constant, which is 28. So our final equation here would be 160 equals 12m plus 28. But it's not just enough to create the equation, to write it down. We need to also solve it. So I'm going to solve for m because they're wondering how much do I have to pay per month. So I'm going to subtract 28 over. And I get 132 equals 12m. I divide both sides by 12. Then I get m equals 11. So members will pay $11. Let's say pay $11 each month. And I can write a more detailed sentence, but it's important that we're saying, what does the 11 represent? The 11 represents the pay per each month, or the cost per each month. You're paying $11 each month, that's the cost per month. Some people might think M means months, so you would say after 11 months. No, we have to read. We're doing the cost per month, so that means we have to pay $11 each month for this gym membership. Let's try another problem to solidify our understanding. So for the next problem, we have one cell phone company charges $35 a month for a phone service plus 50 cents for each text message. How many text messages does Juan send if his bill is $52? So we want to go in and highlight all the important portions here. So they charge $35 a month for a phone service plus, we know the word plus means addition, 50 cents for each text message. We have that word each, so we should remember that. How many text messages does Juan send? So we're working with text messages if his bill is $52. So I want to go through and I'm going to say, what's the total that I'm not going to touch for the rest of it? Well, the bill was $52, so that's my total, so I'm not going to use that in any of my breakdown here. And once again, it was nice that this breakdown was given for you, but when you're doing these problems on your own, on a quiz, on a test, on standardized testing, they're not going to give you this breakdown. You're going to have to remember to find these key points, so we're trying to get you used to this to then apply on your own. So the variable here is we're working with text messages. So I'm going to say T is for text messages, but once again, you can say X is for text messages. The constant, this is the number that no matter how many text messages I send, I'm still paying this per month. Well, that's going to be $35 because I can send a billion text messages or I can send 0 and I still have to pay that $35. I know back in the day we had to pay per text message, so this might seem a little outdated. You guys have unlimited text messages, a lot of you, but this had to happen back when I was young. Anyways, I digress. What is the rate? The rate is where you see each. It's going to be attached to the text messages. So I see each text message. So that's going to be 50 cents. And then I want to plug it into my formula and solve. Well, I said the total is 52. So 52 equals our rate, which is 50 cents, times our variable, which is T, plus our constant, which is 35. And then I'm going to solve this problem. So I'm going to subtract 35 over. And I get 17 equals 0.50 T. I divide by 0.50, or 50 cents, and I get T equals 34. And then we're going weird, we're going up and up. I know you can handle it. So t equals 34. So now I have to put this into my sentence. So I'm going to say 1 sent 34 text messages. Let's try one more problem to finalize this section. For the next problem, we have Friendship Soccer Team purchased uniforms and equipment for a total cost of $912. The equipment cost $612 and the uniforms cost $25 each. How many uniforms did the school purchase? So let's go through and highlight to break down what we need. So the total cost is $912. So that number I am not going to touch when I'm breaking it down because that's the total. The equipment cost, so the equipment cost $612. The uniforms were $25 each. And now how many uniforms did the school purchase? We're working with uniforms. So this is all the key information. We have all our numbers highlighted. We have the item that we're working with highlighted, any key terms here. So we want to define the variables. So we're looking for uniforms. So I'm going to say U is for uniforms. The constant. So no matter how many uniforms I purchase, I have to pay this amount. It's not the total. Remember, we're not working with the total. So the only other number we have is 612. No matter how many uniforms I purchase, I could purchase 0. I could purchase 1,000,000, like I've said before. I still have to pay $612 for the equipment. What is the rate? So I look for the word uniforms. I look for each. I look for per around it, in which I see $25 each for the uniforms. So that's going to be my rate. And then I put it into my equation where the total, which is the equipment, the equipment and the uniforms, which is $912, equals my rate, which is 25, times my variable, which is U, plus my constant, which is just the equipment, which is 612. And now I'm going to solve this equation. So I'm going to subtract 612 from both sides. And I get 300 equals 25U. I divide both sides by 25 and I get U equals 12. So I'm going to say 12 uniforms were purchased. So once again, it's important that we're breaking down the word problem and finding each key point here. You're not going to have this template forever, so you're going to have to make sure you're remembering each time I have a word problem to highlight the key points, to break them down into this format, to condense it into an equation, and then solve it and give a sentence to determine what they're looking for. I hope this was helpful to break down all of these problems.